The Queen's Gambit, new limited series available on Netflix, starring Anya Taylor-Joy. It's based on a novel by Walter Tevis. Since its release about 2.5 weeks ago, it's been getting massive buzz all over the internet, with people praising it for being possibly one of the best series Netflix ever produced. A lot of my friends saw it as well and gushed about it, so I decided to give it a go as well. And now that I finished it, I have to say, I don't think it's a masterpiece of such caliber as some people paint it to be, but it is very good. The story takes place in the 1950s and 1960s, mostly in America, and centers on a character of Beth Harmon, a girl who pretty much grows up in an orphanage, then gets adopted by a rather dysfunctional family as a teenager, and throughout her life continues to struggle with unfulfilling personal relationships and substance abuse, all the while pursuing a career as a professional chess player. She learns to play from a janitor all the way back at the orphanage, and it's clear from the beginning that she's a world-class prodigy with huge potential behind her. As soon as she's old enough, she starts attending tournaments and beating people left and right in the hopes of one day facing and maybe beating the legendary Soviet players, particularly Vasily Borgov, who is this world champion grandmaster. So, first things first, a series that is primarily about playing chess may seem boring for general audiences, at least on paper. In reality, though, the chess parts of the series were the best and most exciting for me personally. I think the creators of the show managed to convey the emotions, the stress, and the stakes of high-level play quite well, and what's most important, I think they managed to do it in ways that will be perfectly understandable for non-players, while at the same time being quite realistic and then compelling for actual players. I've read that at least some of the games were based on real-life famous matches from the 20th century, and one of the consultants of the series was Garry Kasparov, so the positions, openings, terms used by the characters are all pretty much correct. There's also a really creative recurring visual where Beth imagines chessboards upside down on the ceiling above her bed at night, and it helps convey to the audience how and how often she's thinking about chess, replaying those matches over and over, trying things out in a really smart and visually attractive way. Next, I want to talk about Anya Taylor-Joy, who I'm sure for many people will be the reason to watch this. She's very good in the lead role. I had a slight problem buying her as a 15-year-old pretending to be a 13-year-old in the second episode. I think she does look older than that. But it's a minor gripe, because looks aside, I think through her acting she managed to sell the age of the character at all points during the series. You can see not just through the writing, but also through the way she acts, how her character grows up and evolves over time. I think the side characters are well written as well. There's some elements of social commentary thrown in, but they feel very non-intrusive. They're like an afterthought, very much on the side, and they don't take away from the main fundamentals of the show, which are the character study of Beth and chess. I also really I really loved actually the production design, costumes, hairstyling, the sets, particularly the lavish hotel lobbies where major tournaments were played. All of that is absolutely fantastic, and it transports you right back into that time period. There is one area though that I think could have been improved upon. See, at the beginning of the show, first 2-3 episodes, I was a bit disappointed. I thought, well, it certainly doesn't live up to all this hype. And then the show does improve over time, and the final episode really elevates the whole show by wrapping up all of the story threads in a very elegant way. Well, it does at one point feel almost like this Hollywood fairy tale moment where it all comes together magically, but I'm willing to forgive that because it works on an emotional level. And having the perspective of that final episode, it made more sense why the early episodes were so slow, because they set things up for later payoff. However, I've been thinking about it quite a lot, and I think I figured out what was the problem for me. Let's take a look at the narrative structure of the very start of the show, so there will be no spoilers really. We open with Beth playing, waking up late at a hotel, scrambling to get her bearings, and then getting down to the lobby, and finally sitting down to play against the Russian Borgov, who, as we quickly learn, is this for lack of a better word, main antagonist of the entire series. And the scene is built in a way that we immediately recognize the stakes are high, and this is some sort of pivotal moment in the story, despite it being the first scene. However, we then immediately go into a flashback, which basically lasts 5 episodes. We learn all of the backstory of Beth, following her life chronologically from the moment she lands at the orphanage, and only by episode 6 we finally catch up with that Borgov game. Now, this is a common narrative technique used in many different media. I personally see it most often in comic books. You'll often have the cover of a book that teases, the villain of that issue, and then the first page is already this big spread where the massive fight begins, and the hero is in trouble, but we don't yet know why or how or what. And then the next page just says 2 days earlier, and for example, and we go into a flashback and then catch up to that opening scene. And we as the audience are engaged from minute 1, because despite the slower build-up that could potentially be uneventful in itself, we know that just around the corner there is this big scene waiting that we'll get to because it was shown to us. But this narrative trick has, I think, a built-in timer. Basically, if you take too long getting to the scene you opened with, it eventually gets boring, because on the one hand, this isn't really the juicy stuff, and on the other, you're primed to think that because the scene we're building up to is so important, then maybe some of the drama leading up to it is actually inconsequential. Using this structure, you do immediately grab the audience's attention and interest, but you need to do something with it other than holding it, or eventually the question presents itself, well, when are we finally going to get there? And here's another interesting point. I think there's a way around that problem, and it's to present the audience with immediate drama that is happening in between. I'll give you an example, so stay with me, okay? Naruto Shippuden, which is essentially the second season of a long-running anime, does exactly that. The first series ends with the protagonist going off with his master to train some more, get better, get stronger, and then return to the village and continue with his mission, which is to bring his best friend Sasuke, who left the village for personal vendetta and became this sort of rogue ninja. So we have Shippuden, which opens without explanation, with Naruto running through some mysterious tunnels. He's visibly grown up, different costumes, so we know some time has passed. And then there's an explosion, he gets out, we see this cool figure towering above the heroes, and it turns out it's Sasuke, also aged up, also different look. And it's this holy shit moment, like, what is going on here? This is great, we didn't expect to get right into it. And then we go back, just like in Queen's Gambit, into a flashback to catch us up with the story. And in this case, the flashback lasts for, I think, a good 40 episodes or something. And yet during that time, I never really got impatient as to when is Sasuke finally going to show up. Because in the meantime, Naruto was presented with more immediate obstacles to overcome, which are themselves engaging and gripping, and so they sort of distract us from the fact that we're not at the moment following the main plot. It's out there, it's in the back of our minds, we know it's coming, but as we're getting there, we're presented with immediate drama apart from the one lingering in the distance. And I think this is what the Queen's Gambit doesn't do so well. The show uses these initial episodes to flesh out the characters, to give us the full background, and to set things up for later payoff. But I felt there was a distinct lack of immediate conflict. We know Borgov is out there somewhere, but until we get to him, it would be interesting to see Beth go through other hurdles. I don't think that's happening. In terms of both her personal life and especially chess, she mostly just breezes through, with the encountered setbacks being minor at best. There was no moment where I went, oh damn, what now? How are you going to solve this problem? How are you going to deal with this drama? Because the problems that Beth faces in the first half of the story are fairly minuscule, and pretty much always there is an immediate solution. So at a certain point I was getting impatient. I was like, right, this is all cool, the world building and stuff, but I want conflict, I want drama, and I don't see it in here. And yet I know it's coming in the person of Borgov, so can we get to that already? This, I think, is what holds the show back ultimately and keeps it from being truly excellent, at least in my book. I would have loved it if it either challenged its protagonist earlier on, or just shortened those episodes so that we get to the meat of the story quicker. Now, I know this was a bit of a long rant and it may seem like I'm heavily critical of the series, but I've actually really enjoyed this mental exercise that it gave me. And to repeat this one more time, I think it does get progressively better, it does close the story in an elegant way, and it does eventually excuse the slowness of the first episodes somehow. It's something that I can forgive it. There are flaws that I recognize, but I'm okay with them. It ended up being a really solid show with great world building in this historical period and some very fine acting. And hey, maybe it also inspires more people to pick up chess, which is always a good idea.